3 years after the COVID-19 shots hit the market, we are seeing tyrannical control of the medical community like never before. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Dr. Peter McCullough is an internist, epidemiologist, and one of the most published cardiologists in America. Dr. McCullough has been on the forefront giving us solid research and information about COVID, its treatments, and the shots. But he, like many other doctors, are being threatened and censored for speaking the truth. I'm blessed to again be joined by co-host Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, Dr. McCullough has been a great help to so many of us with his protocols and research. He often speaks publicly, testifies to Congress, and has given his medical declaration for Liberty Counsel's military case. But this medical censorship is having tragic effects on people's lives.
Well, it's censorship that is very bad in general, but when you censor medical doctors and scientists from pursuing and even asking questions, seeking the truth, that's life and death. And with regards to COVID, when you censor medications such as ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine and you try to suppress those, and then any doctor that wants to prescribe ivermectin or does not want to prescribe remdesivir in your hospital situation because of its adverse or very low performing effects on COVID. And when they get censored, that becomes life and death. I mean, we all experience this when you tried to find ivermectin or try to find a doctor that would prescribe ivermectin. And some of the pharmacies would prohibit those scripts when the doctor would give it. Some of the doctors, because of their hospital affiliations, wouldn't provide it because it was outside of the Fauci, CDC, FDA protocol. That is life and death. And so there is a real problem that we've experienced with regards to, one, doctors not pursuing truth and science, and number two, censorship that's focused on those individuals to target their livelihoods and their licenses when they speak out or seek the truth.
For those of you at home, we have so much to bring you today. Valuable, truthful information that hopefully will help you make great decisions to protect yourself and your families. Up next is our Freedom Alert.
He risked his career by refusing the COVID shot and won big. I'm Matt Staver, co-host of Freedom Alive. Novak Djokovic was deported for refusing the COVID-19 shot and couldn't play in the 2022 Australian Open. Djokovic is known for his successful tennis career, but gained greater recognition for his outspoken stance against the COVID-19 shot mandate. In a 2022 interview, he was asked if he was willing to forego the chance to be the greatest player that ever picked up a racket because he felt so strongly about the jab. "Yes, I do," Djokovic responded, "because the principles of decision-making on my body are more important than any title." He recently returned to Australia to win the 10th Australian Open and the 22nd Grand Slam title. Ironically, Bill Gates was in attendance to watch the victory.
Up next, Matt's interview with Dr. Peter McCullough.
My very special guest is Dr. Peter McCullough, expert in internal medicine, cardiology, epidemiology, and certainly in all things related to COVID. Dr. McCullough, you have been a courageous voice, a voice among voices, a doctor among doctors with regards to pursuing the truth related to COVID. And as a result of your stand, you have been targeted by those that want to silence you. Have you ever experienced anything like that personally, as well as how you've seen it attack others as well that are professionals around the world?
I've never seen it. I'm one of the most published doctors in my field in the world in history. As a parallel, Dr. Didier Rialt, the most published microbiologist in the world, has faced extreme professional reprisal as I have. You know, as a doctor, I took an oath to, above all, do no harm and do everything I can to help my patients, and I fulfilled my oath. The question on the table is, where were the other doctors? I've been forced now out of 2 jobs with no explanation. I've had 2 major editorships, taken away without any editorial board meeting, without any due process, professorships stripped away, all my NIH committees, all my pharmaceutical committees. I'm being right now stripped of my medicine and cardiology boards, my residencies, my fellowship. I won't be able to contract with insurances or hold hospital privileges, all because I told the truth and I treated each and every patient as I should have. I had a duty to treat them. And I've been forward-facing in the media, and I think I am being specifically targeted through all of these means by some type of central force. I don't think all these independent entities made their own independent decisions. They haven't told me they have. I think there's actually behind this some type of force at work because there's such a strong worldwide motivation to force vaccination on the entire world.
Well, as an example to that, somebody who hasn't followed you, just to reiterate, you're the most published person in your field of internal medicine cardiology specialty in history in the world. And cardiology would obviously be a very critical area of practice now, particularly with all of the heart conditions that have been occurring subsequent to these shots. And yet you're censored, and others like you who are in the field of specialty that have always received accolades. They're at the top of their field globally, are also targets for censorship. How do you explain that? You mentioned that there is a force. I think I agree with you on that, because last year, when you and others got letters from your board certification organizations, internal medicine cardiology for you, pathology for Dr. Ryan Cole or somebody else, for example, they all came at the same time, within about a week of each other. They all had similar language. That doesn't just happen haphazardly. It's not just a coincidence. There is a coordinating effort to silence doctors.
Yeah, there definitely is a coordinated effort. To clarify, I focus on this interface between heart and kidney disease, and I have now over 650 listings in the National Library of Medicine. Typically 25 would get somebody professor of medicine at a medical school, to give you an idea. There's a few cardiologists that are ahead of me. One of them, my office mate for a long time, William Roberts, and then the father of modern cardiology, Eugene Braunwald at Harvard. Now, both of them are nearly 90. I'm age 60. I have published for decades in Dr. Braunwald's textbook. I've lectured at the European Medicine Society, the New York Academy of Sciences. I was the visiting endowed lecturer at Harvard in 2018. I've testified in the FDA Congressional Oversight Panel in 2007. So I've been a household name, and I think myself, and similarly Dr. Paul Merrick, who's one of the most published doctors in all of critical care medicine, and Didier Riault in France, I think we've all been targeted because we're at the top of the academic pyramid, and we've spoken out against what we've seen in pandemic response.
Now, it doesn't make sense, when you look at it from a logical standpoint, that you would just simply want to pursue the truth and you would be censored. But, you look through history, there have been different things within the medical profession and other professions as well, where voices come up and they challenge the established narrative. And what you're doing, what others are doing, are challenging this big pharma established narrative that everybody on the planet needs to be vaccinated and that everybody ought to get the COVID-19 shots. But there's also a coordination between big pharma and big government as well.
We described that in our book. We call it the biopharmaceutical complex. And it's formed over the last few decades. We think at the top is the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, Gates and Wellcome Trust Foundations, Rockefeller Foundation, Gavi, CEPI, Unitaid. All of these organizations are highly coordinated. I think they do a lot of coordination in these annual meetings at Davos. And look at who goes there. That tells you a lot. All the big pharma players were there, the World Economic, WHO, they're all there. It looks like they're having planning meetings. They've conducted pandemic preparedness planning meetings, dozens of them. This is highly coordinated. And when SARS-CoV-2 virus outbreak occurred, it was go time for mass vaccination.
And how we actually approached this SARS-CoV-2 and the public policy side, that seemed to be contrary to decades of pandemic preparedness.
Absolutely. Pandemic preparedness is always about treating patients who are sick with the illness, no matter what it is. But in this case, there was a complete opposite. There was a neglect of people who were acutely sick and a singular focus on the vaccine. I almost think the fear and the sickness, hospitalization, and deaths were intentional in order to drive people into mass vaccination.
Now, for those that have been following you, they're aware of the Baylor lawsuit. And I understand that that Baylor lawsuit has now been dismissed by the court with prejudice.
That's correct. I received word that on January 23rd, that Associate Judge Tahira Khan Merritt granted a non-suit and dismissed with prejudice all claims asserted or could have been asserted in the case. I think this is a strong victory for freedom of speech and for my analyses over the course of the pandemic. My opinions have always been my own. I've never stated that I represent an institution, and under no circumstances would I ever do so.
But it's just another one of those attempts to try to intimidate you. And one thing that I've learned about you, having gotten to know you through this pandemic, is there's probably not other people like you as courageous as you are. Once you pursue and seek the truth, you're going to pursue and seek that truth, no matter what the consequences are to you personally. And I just want to thank you for that, because you've been a leading voice. Other people would have been silenced. You have not. Your information saved my life, frankly. It's saved so many other people's lives. And what we're talking about is not just censorship in general. We're talking about censorship that's life and death in its consequences when you censor scientists and the medical professions.
I completely agree. Lives have been lost because of censorship. Scott Atlas, former White House advisor, said that specifically about what we learned in Twitter. Twitter had dozens of FBI and CDC officials in there to basically promote a false narrative, and lives were lost.
Now, there was a recent lawsuit that struck down temporarily. It gave a preliminary injunction to a California law that censored doctors. The law in California was going to allow the medical boards to revoke or punish the licenses of those doctors that gave, quote, misinformation or disinformation regarding COVID-19. The judge ultimately said that their definition of misinformation and disinformation was nonsense.
Nonsense and certainly vague. California AB 2098, the doctor muzzle law, which did go into effect January 1st, was struck down inappropriately. So 2 lawsuits that I'm aware of went after this at the heart. You know, doctors give opinions and second opinions, and this law would have disallowed a doctor giving an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, doctors disagree with each other. I mean, that's the nature of medicine, and that's the beauty of it, that you can have different opinions that either agree or they disagree. But once a doctor or a scientist is censored, the consequences, particularly in the context of COVID, is literally dangerous to the public health.
It's completely true. You know, even our treatments of COVID, they have hazards to them. And it takes a doctor's judgment and opinion to help navigate people through acute COVID, recurrent cases, vaccine injuries. It's a novel field. We need as much discussion, and actually we should invite disagreement so we can get to the right answer as opposed to muzzle doctors.
Now, you were part of the very first peer-reviewed document with regards to treatment of COVID, and that was back in 2020. You were part of that, and you've laid out the protocol, and that's developed over time as well as part of protocol for treatment. That was peer-reviewed. Now, if you were to try to do that today, would you be able to get that peer-reviewed?
I don't think so. We've seen tremendous corruption and bias in the medical literature now. Virtually no paper can get in on treating COVID with an innovative approach, and certainly nothing on vaccine injuries, disabilities, and deaths now. We're having to look at remote journals from foreign countries. The mainline journals will not let a single paper come in that would lead somebody to the conclusion to not taking a vaccine.
One of the things that seems to be a concern are the burgeoning hospitals, for example, that become very large institutions. They end up taking over some of the private practitioners, and so they become employees of that hospital. And then those hospitals develop protocols. For example, in the COVID, they developed a protocol that came from the regulatory agencies, the CDC, and if they followed that protocol, remdesivir and the other protocol that they would do, they would get certain funding. If they didn't follow it, they didn't get funding. So when a doctor that is employed with one of these hospitals wants to prescribe ivermectin, they're told by the hospital that they can't. What's the future of medicine when we're seeing what we have seen with regards to COVID, the censorship and the monopoly that's taking place within the big pharma and big hospital systems?
Doctors should always be independent on medical staff, never be controlled by the hospital or health system. We've seen this now, I think, collusion that's led to disastrous patient outcomes. If a doctor doesn't think remdesivir is safe for a COVID patient, and as the World Health Organization says, don't use it, a doctor should have the full right and authority to not use remdesivir. Alternatively, if a doctor believes ivermectin is safe and effective for a COVID patient, as shown in the ICON study in Americans, published in one of the best journals, Chest, in 2020 by Dr. Roster, prospective comparative study, 50% reduction with ivermectin. Why shouldn't a doctor be able to prescribe ivermectin, a safe and effective drug, safer than Tylenol? These types of abrogations and departures from good clinical practice, for the first time in my career, I've seen hospitals, health systems, state medical boards, and federal agencies interfere with the doctor's standard of care, and the patients pay dearly with unnecessarily hospitalizations and deaths.
So how do we go about changing this situation? Because it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better if we just accept it or we're silent.
We need statewide and federal probes. I think every state Health and Human Services Committee should do an immediate probe on the use of remdesivir in the hospital. Who used it and why? And why wasn't it pulled off the shelf when the World Health Organization said it was contraindicated? Which hospitals prohibited ivermectin and why? And again, do a deep probe on how this occurred. We know some patients were fortunate enough to get the right treatment and they survived, and others didn't. And there's variation from hospital to hospital. Only an investigation will lead to answers.
And I know, for example, in some of these areas like Central Florida, where I am located, there's two primary hospital systems, and they are massive. And many of the doctors are associated with it in one way or another. And when those hospitals tell the physicians that they can or can't do certain kinds of medications, many of them comply with it. So it seems like we need to have some kind of investigation and some kind of reanalysis of what's happening into the future of our healthcare, because monopolies are never good. And what we're starting to see is a major monopoly. And when that monopoly receives money from the federal government, then all these other doctors seem to fall in line because of their association with the medical facilities.
It's true. Most of this was in the context of the national emergency declared by the president and then the public health emergency declared by the HHS secretary. And it was somehow emergency and the use of the term countermeasure, which is a military term, almost as if this was a national security operation. And doctors felt they were like foot soldiers for the federal government. And it was disastrous for the public.
Well, you have written a book, and it is very appropriately titled The Courage to Face COVID-19, Preventing Hospitalization and Death While Battling the Biopharmaceutical Complex. How can viewers obtain your book?
Go to the website, couragetofacecovid.com. You can read about the book and order it there. The audiobook's very popular now. But we have the audio from the actual events, my Senate testimony, my speech on the Lincoln Memorial, and so many more.
CourageToFaceCovid.com. You can get the book. You can also find information about your Substack, which comes out every day. I think I get an email from you every day about information.
It's at Courageous Discourse, similar term, but it's a broad discourse, not only on COVID, but on civil liberties and social trends of the time.
And then one other source that I want you to provide to our viewers, and that's the wellness source as well.
Wellness Company is an alternative health opportunity, health system forming, twc.health.com. It's oftentimes an added benefit by employers. It now offers access to nutraceutical supplements, doctors, and dental. And I think it's a must-have for those Americans without health care insurance. Less than $10 a month for your member, access to doctors, $60. It's really been a breakthrough for Americans in need of health care and some honest appraisal of what's going on.
Well, Dr. McCullough, thank you for your courage, thank you for your voice, and thank you for joining us on Freedom Alive.
Thank you.
Matt, let's go back to what Dr. McCullough said. He took an oath, do no harm. the significance of this censorship, and really beyond that, the actions that others have taken against him. I mean, the price that he's paid simply for telling the truth has been unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, and he is one of the most courageous people that I've ever met. He will speak the truth no matter the personal consequences, and he's faced a lot of personal consequences, but he's continued to stand for the truth. And unfortunately, Dr. McCullough is not the only one who has faced this kind of censorship and personal attacks. Yeah. And we're talking about individuals who scientifically and in the medical community, both in the United States and even globally, are at the very top of their achievement. They are the top of the top, and they have received all kinds of accolades. They've received all kinds of awards and achievements and recognition, and yet because they would not follow the CDC, FDA, government-approved narrative on COVID, the COVID shots, they have been targeted. I believe, without a question, 100%, as he said, there is a coordinated effort. It is not only a domestic effort, but it's a global effort to silence anyone who is pushing back on this big pharma. We need to really take this seriously, because if they can censor science and medicine, censor these doctors from giving second opinions. I mean, don't we all want a doctor that would possibly have a second opinion, maybe different from the other doctor we just received? Isn't that part of getting second opinions? What they're doing is censoring second opinions, that there's only one opinion, and there's not a second opinion, there's not a disagreeing opinion, there's only one opinion. It's the opinion that the government wants you to get. We cannot tolerate living in a society like that. It's worse than censorship in general, which is bad enough, but this kind of censorship is life and death. Mm-hmm. This kind of censorship says this doctor has a cure for you, and he is not, or she is not able to give it to you because the government is not sanctioning that. This doctor has an opinion that this particular medication is harmful for you, but you can't hear that because it doesn't match the narrative of the CDC and the FDA. Mm-hmm. We need a complete revamp of our agencies that are the regulatory agencies, particularly beginning with the FDA that approves these drugs, the CDC, and the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, because they have become too cozy with big pharma, and they're just an extension of the big pharmaceutical companies. That has to stop because it doesn't protect the health and well-being of the public, which they're supposed to be doing as part of their operation.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was amazing, the very clear, cogent label that he applies to it, the biopharmaceutical complex, right? It's hard to argue.
It really is. I mean, you think about this, you know, there's a lot when you get into big pharma. Big pharma is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you look at, for example, COVID, what happened with Pfizer alone was phenomenal from a business perspective, exploding its growth because of the COVID shot. And then the president of the head of Pfizer saying that there's no safety signals. Well, no, there is. Your own documents show that you have 1,290 some safety signals that were even part of your clinical trials. You knew that. Demyelinization. You have all these other things, the myocarditis and pericarditis. You know about all that. You do know about that, but you've lied. And then that cabal works with this revolving door of the regulatory systems, as Dr. Walker said on tape.
Exactly.
And that,
the Pfizer executive.
The Pfizer executive, that these people who are in the regulatory agencies, FDA, they don't want to criticize or say something bad about a pharmaceutical company because once they finish their time in government, they want to go get a better paying job with the pharmaceutical company. We have to really address that. We need investigations to stop that. And we need to also look at the whole monopoly system that we're experiencing around the country with regards to the hospitals gobbling up the private practitioner and controlling the market, especially when they're getting money from the United States government and also our government, as what our government did, not only giving money to these hospitals for a certain protocol, not allowing any other protocol, not allowing any deviating opinion, but also controlling the media, paying money to the media to only give positive information about COVID shots don't publish anything that would be negative against the COVID shots. Don't publish anything negative against the lockdowns or some of those mandates. That has to stop as well.
Mm-hmm. Along those lines, how about the point Dr. McCullough made about the future of medicine and independent doctors?
I think the future of medicine is really up in the balance right now, and it's really undetermined as to where we're going to go. But if we lose independent of medical doctors, we have really suffered significantly. And what we're seeing now is a loss of independence of the medical profession. We're seeing that with the monopolization of the mega hospital systems that are gobbling up the marketplace. We're seeing that with the funding of the federal government to these hospitals and healthcare systems that want them to follow a particular narrative. And we're seeing it with a coordinated effort, I think, led by behind the scenes, the federal government in censoring with respect to the social media markets. We saw that in Twitter, that the government was involved in the censorship of anything negative with regards to the COVID shots. And we also saw that with respect to coordinating these boards that certify doctors in various specialties, whether it's cardiology, internal medicine, pathology, OBGYN, and so forth. Coordinated effort happened at the same time to censor and intimidate doctors who wouldn't follow the government-approved script.
For those of you at home, we are delighted to bring this information to you. As Matt said earlier, Dr. McCullough is one of a faithful few, and we've been blessed to bring you a number of these doctors on Freedom Alive as you've watched over the last several years. Time after time after time, we've brought you these facts and this truth from people who are on the front line dealing with patients and developing protocols. And in every case, there has been an enormous, frightening price. And the courage that they've exhibited has been unbelievable. It's our delight to bring this information to you. We're going to stay on this issue and others just like it. Well, in closing, remember James 1, verse 12, which says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again on Freedom Alive.
A deadly virus emanating from Wuhan, China is sweeping across the globe.
Something is off.
The disease caused by the novel coronavirus has been titled COVID-19.
What we're being told doesn't add up.
So important in this crisis that we're in. That people
Congress passes a multi-billion-dollar bill that will bring...
There is no cure and no way to treat this illness.
There must be a doctor out there who's questioning this.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm the Vice Chairman of Internal Medicine. The only chance to reduce the risks of hospitalization is early home treatment. We can beat this pandemic.